The Night Bus Hero, Chapter 2, The Trolley Man. "I can't believe you got caught by Mr. Lancaster and Miss Baxter," said Katie. She was waiting with Will in the playground for me, just like they always did when I had detention. "You're so old. You need to be way quicker, H. You're getting slow." I looked at the floor. I could feel my face going red. Whenever they think I've messed up, Will and Katie never stop talking about it. Sometimes I'll give them a punch, but I knew this time that Katie was right. I should have been faster. "Come on, let's go and have some fun with Year 3, said Will, trying to cheer me up. "Look, there's Felix. If we're lucky, he might even wet himself a little bit." Will gave me a wink. He's always suggesting we do things that will make everyone more scared of us. Will's been my friend since the day we started school together. I saw him flicking bits of rubber at everyone and then lying about it, and knew right away that he'd be fun to team up with. Will's like me. Well, kind of. He's a bit of a coward and lies a lot, whereas I don't bother lying, not ever. Mainly because it's more fun to see grown-ups' faces when you shock them by telling the truth. Will's okay though. He's funny, and he always helps me spot teachers' pets and brainiacs and show-offs and anyone who has more money than is healthy for them. He's bigger and taller than me, so when we walk around together, everyone knows it's us right away. His hair is bright yellow and straight and sticks up like straw from a scarecrow's head. Makes him look like a bit of a mad scientist. My straight brown hair just flops over my face and halfway over my eyes, as if it's too lazy to do anything, so I don't look like a mad anything. "Go on," urged Katie, poking me with her elbow and pointing at Felix and his group of tiny friends. "I dare you to." I glanced around at Mrs. Simpson, who was standing by the gates just 10 steps away from us, talking to some parents. It's always tricky beating someone up at home time. If a parent catches you, even Mr. Lancaster gets into trouble, and that means getting detention until he retires. I looked at Katie. She was challenging me with one of her eyebrows. Katie loves challenging people with her eyebrows. She joined our school last year after she got expelled from another school, and me and Will knew right away that she was one of us. We became friends the moment I saw her using her eyebrows to tell Maylee and Robert that she was going to chase them into the next town if they came near her. Katie's super tall and super fast runner, so she could probably do it if she wanted to. She's the palest skin I've ever seen on anyone, and straight brown hair that looks as if it's been ironed, and large square glasses. Normally, anyone who wears glasses is a teacher pet or a brainiac, but Katie is different. "What are you waiting for?" whispered Katie. "You are getting slow." That did it. I gave her a scowl and immediately began walking towards my target. But at the exact moment I reached him, Mrs. Simpson turned round. Her eyes fell on me right away, so I had to run past Felix and straight out of the gates to make her think I was late for something. "Oh, man, you waited too long," growled Will a moment later as he and Katie joined me. We walked in silence past the sweet shop on the corner of the street and headed towards the big double road that led to the park gates. I kicked at some pebbles by my feet. I wanted to kick something bigger and harder. "What's wrong with him?" whispered Will loudly. "I don't know," said Katie, only half whispering. "He's probably just sore because he's too slow and he keeps getting caught." I darted across the road between beeping cars and entered the park, heading up the big grey pathway towards the hill where all the biggest oak trees were. Will and Katie were still talking to each other about me. When they really want to get on my nerves, they pretend to be whispering to each other without really whispering at all. "What a sore loser," fake whispered Will. "Right, fake," whispered Katie. "You'd think it was our fault that he's not fast enough anymore." My hands rolled up into fists and the top of my head felt as hot as a barbecue with fresh lit coals in it. I wanted to turn round and push Will and Katie as hard as I could so they wouldn't dare say any of the things they were saying ever again. We reached the top of the hill where an old bench stood beneath the oak trees, and that's where I spotted him, the old man. I'd seen him there before, lots of times, sitting on the bench next to a trolley piled up high with rubbish. He was in his usual long, old, crumply black coat that looked as if it had been pulled out from a bin, and he was wearing the bright yellow woolly hat he always had on his head, even in summer. And without even trying, I had the most genius idea that had ever been born. In fact, it was so genius and so out of the box and so unexpected that I knew it would be enough to make Will and Katie shut up once and for all. I stopped walking, which made Will and Katie automatically stop too. Will looked at me blankly, but Katie's eyebrows immediately jumped up as if to say, "Yeah, and what?" "Want to have some fun?" I asked. Will nodded, a smile breaking across his face and making him look like a hungry fox that had sniffed a chicken coop up ahead. "See that old man over there?" I asked, pointing towards the bench. "You mean the old trolley man?" asked Katie. "We're going to let him know he's not allowed here anymore." "How?" whispered Katie, leaning in towards me. She pushed her glasses up on the bridge of her nose. I waited for a few seconds to keep them guessing, and then whispered back, "I'm going to take his hat." "His hat?" asked Will. "Yep, he's always wearing that gross, stinky hat." Katie finally smiled, which meant she thought my idea was cool. "Come on," I said, "let's go." When we reached the bench, we could see the old man had fallen asleep. His black, grey, fluffy beard was acting like a pillow for his chin as it rested on his chest, and his dirty wool hat was falling to one side, like a Santa Claus hat, except it was yellow, not red. He was breathing heavily through his pink-tipped nose, while his half-gloved fingers moved every few seconds, as if they were playing a tune to a song that no one else could hear. "He's asleep," whispered Will, as we all stood in front of him. "No way, genius," said Katie, rolling her eyeballs. "What now?" she asked, looking at me. I put my fingers to my lips and then tiptoed my way round the bench and went to stand behind the man. Reaching out, I hovered my hand over his hat, ready to grab it and run. Will and Katie stared at me. Will's mouth was open and Katie's eyes were shining like two pools of water that had just been hit by sunlight. In less time than it took them to blink, I snatched the yellow hat from the old man's head and turned, ready to run. But before I could even take a step, a large hand with dirty fingernails grabbed my shoulder. "And what do you think you're doing?" shouted the old man, leaping to his feet and pulling me back. Quickly, I threw the hat in Will's direction. It worked. The old man let go of me and ran towards it, but Will was too fast and caught it. "Want this, trolley man?" teased Will as he held the hat out. The old man reached for it, but about at the last second, Will threw the hat to me, laughing. In a flash, I threw it to Katie, and Katie threw it back to Will. The old man spun round and around, not sure which of us to try and catch first. Then suddenly he stopped and looked straight at me. I looked back, straight into the small brown eyes surrounded by wrinkles. "You," he said, pointing a finger at me. "You give it back." I grinned. "Yeah, make me." I began spinning the hat round on the top of my finger like a woolly yellow basketball. For a few seconds, all he did was stare at me. Then, as swift as lightning, he crouched to the ground and, jumping back, flicked his wrist towards me with a quick chopping motion. Something hard stung in my face. "Pat, pat, 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 pat." "Ow!" cried Will. "Oi! Stop that!" yelled Katie as they both started to back away. I felt a sting of pain on my leg, and then my face again, and then something hard hit my palm. Closing my hand around a small, sharp object, I finally understood what was happening. The old man was throwing tiny stones at us. "Off with ya!" he cried angrily as his hands magically produced more and more tiny stone bullets. "Or I'll have your guts for garters!" Will and Katie began to ram back down the hill under a shower of pebbles, yelping in pain as they went. I tried to stand my ground, clutching the hat. "Come on, then!" cried the old man. He started to laugh as the little stones flew at me quicker than before. Before I knew it, I dropped the hat. He started walking towards me, and I quickly realised there was nothing I could do. He was too big to fight on my own, and he was armed too. "I'll be back!" I shouted, feeling hot and angry and red as I ran down the hill to where Katie and Will were waiting. "And I'll be waiting for you, you little scum!" the old man shouted back as a large stone hit me on the back of my leg. It wasn't until I reached Katie and Will that I noticed a crowd had gathered. Dog walkers were watching us with their mouths open or frowns on their faces. The dogs were staring at us too. "Come on, let's get out of here," I cried, walking towards the park gates. Will and Katie followed me out, bowing their heads down low so that nobody could see their faces properly. But I didn't bow my head low, like I should have done, because I could hear Will sniggering, and I could see Katie starting to giggle too, and I knew they were laughing at me, again. "What are you laughing at?" I asked, feeling my face bone. "He got you good, even though he's super old." "Yes," said Katie, "and homeless. Talk about embarrassing." I'm going to get him back, I said as we hurried out of the park gates. You'll see. Yeah, how? Asked Katie, challenging me with her eyebrows again. But I didn't know. Not yet. At the park gates, Katie and Will turned left on the road that would lead them to their homes. I could still hear them giggling and sniggering as they disappeared into the distance. Once they were gone, I looked back over my shoulder and through the railings to the top of the hill. I could see the old man with his yellow hat back on his head, walking away with his trolley as if nothing had happened, as if he hadn't just embarrassed me in front of my friends. I made a silent promise to him, right then and there, that I would get him back for what he'd done, and I would get him back so good that not even stone bullets would ever be able to stop me.